Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. To bust India's claims of executing surgical strikes targeting militant camps in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan has offered to let India's Deputy High Commissioner visit any coordinates in the region given by New Delhi. UN observers, international and local media have also been invited to visit the line of control. Islamabad says a visit can be arranged as early as tomorrow. Earlier, Pakistan's Foreign Office summoned India's Deputy High Commissioner Gaurav Ahluwalia over ceasefire violations by the Indian Army. Pakistan condemned the deliberate targeting of civilian populated areas along the line of control by the Indian forces. For more on this development, we are joined by our Islamabad correspondent, Isa Naqvi. Isa, thank you. Isa, what do you have the details regarding this offer by Pakistan's Foreign Office to India?
Well, it all, Jawad, started on the night of 19th of October and continued on the 20th of October that Indian troops at the line of control in three sectors, Joda, Shakot and Nosheri sectors, and specifically targeting Nusadda village in that area. And in an interesting and unprecedented development, Pakistan has now offered Indian Deputy Head of Mission, who's also charged the affairs of the Indian High Commission, Mr. Gaurav Ahluwalia. He was summoned to the Foreign Office today and he was told that since India has been making these claims, and the Indian Army Chief, he made this claim that these attacks were to target so-called terror launch pads inside Pakistan. So this has been asked if India could share the map coordinates. And if there is some truth to the Indian claim, then the Indian High Commissioner is welcome to join the diplomatic corps tomorrow in this area and prove it to the world that the Indian claims are correct, because the sources here, they are very sure about it's the areas that have been targeted. They are civilian areas. Civilians have been targeted. The several people who have been injured have been shifted to the district headquarters hospital, and 5 civilians were martyred. The relatives of these families, they will also have meetings with the diplomatic corps that will be visiting also the representatives of the United Nations military observer group in Pakistan and India. These representatives, they will also be there. The international media has been invited and the local media to visit the area and take a first-hand look at what the Indian troops have done and the kind of claims they are making, if whether there is some truth to it or not.
So Isa, Islamabad says it can be arranged as early as tomorrow. So is there any reply or response from the Indian side to this offer?
Well, if there has to be something, then this is the time for India to give its reply. The offer was made in the afternoon, and about 4 to 5 hours have passed since the offer was made, and the Indian Deputy Head of Mission had to inform the Foreign Office that he'll communicate the same to New Delhi, and obviously they will wait for the instructions to come from New Delhi. If there has to be something, it has to be by tonight or maximum by tomorrow morning when the diplomatic corps leaves for these areas to visit, because the visit has been arranged for tomorrow. Now is the time for India to come forward and prove its claim.
Okay, thank you for updating regarding the of the Pakistan's Foreign Office to India. If it wants to prove about the coordinates for which it is saying that it hit in Pakistan yesterday, violating once again the ceasefire arrangement between both of these countries. Now, moving on, Pakistan has rejected the Indian Army Chief's claims of destroying 3 terror camps in Azad Kashmir, calling the statement disappointing. In a tweet, a military spokesman, Major General Asif Ghafoor, said there are no such camps inside the territory. He said the Indian Army made such claims to fulfill their own vested domestic interests. Ghafoor said the Indian Embassy in Pakistan is welcome to bring foreign diplomats and the media to visit the area across the line of control. He challenged New Delhi to prove the existence of any such entity. Meanwhile, Indians are voting to elect the state legislatures of Maharashtra and Haryana. The ruling BJP has formed a coalition with the extremist Shiv Sena party to retain power in both the states. Ballots are being cast for 288 seats in the Maharashtra State Assembly and 90 in Haryana. By-polls are also being held today for the 2 Lok Sabha constituencies and 51 seats in 18 state assemblies. The elections come a day after India launched unprovoked attacks across the line of control, falsely claiming it targeted 3 terror camps. Yesterday, Congress leader Akhilesh Singh said the BJP government made claims of strikes against Pakistan whenever there are elections in major states. In another development, India is forcing detained Kashmiri politicians to sign a bond surrendering their right to speak against the illegal annexation of the occupied valley. New Delhi has amended its criminal law to chalk out the affidavit demanding complete silence over the recent events. Signing the bond has been declared as an essential price for release from the Indian prisons. The second clause asked them to submit 10,000 Indian rupees as surety and an additional 40,000 rupees in case of violation. Reacting to report, Indian authorities defended the change as being absolutely legal. In a related development, 2 more British lawmakers have raised their voice against India's clampdown in occupied Kashmir. Speaking at the Kashmir conference in London, MPs Matt Rodda and Phillips Lee spoke in support of Kashmiris' right to self-determination. Speaking at the event, Rodda said he was shocked to learn 9 million people are living in radio silence since 5th of August. Lee said the UN must implement its Security Council resolutions to settle the Kashmir issue once and for all. Meanwhile, hundreds of Kashmiris and locals held an anti-India protest in the Canadian city of Montreal. The protesters said they are speaking for Kashmiris suffering at the hands of Indian forces for the past 7 decades. New Delhi's lockdown and communication blackout in the occupied valley has entered its 78th day. President Tayyip Erdogan says he will decide Turkey's next step in Syria after meeting Russia's President Vladimir Putin tomorrow. Erdogan is due to hold talks with Putin in Russia's Black Sea resort of Sochi. Last week, Ankara and Washington agreed to a 5-day truce in northeastern Syria. The Syrian Kurdish YPG militia was allowed to withdraw from a border safe zone that Turkey aims to establish. Erdogan says Turkish military operations in northeastern Syria will resume if the withdrawal is not complete within the 5-day time frame. The 120-hour Washington brokered ceasefire will expire tomorrow at 1900 GMT.
Terrorism can't be fought with new walls. Instead, we need to walk hand in hand towards a brighter future. We can't confine ourselves within borders of comfort. This is a question for everybody and depends on which side of history we want to be on. Are we going to stand with justice or tyranny? It is unjust to dump this responsibility on countries bearing the brunt of irregular migration and terror. This can no longer be sustained.
Iran has rejected the establishment of Turkey's military posts in Syria, calling for a diplomatic solution. Foreign Ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi said the integrity of Tehran's key ally must be respected. Tehran has repeatedly warned against the violation of Syria's borders and the occupation of its territory. Earlier, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said he will set up surveillance military posts inside Syria to ensure the withdrawal of the Kurdish forces. In a speech, Erdogan said if the Kurds don't vacate the area, Turkish forces will start where they left off. U.S. troops withdrawing from northeastern Syria have crossed into Iraq. Witnesses say the armored vehicles carrying troops entered Iraq through the Sahela border, crossing in the northern Dohuk province. They also claimed to have seen 30 American trailers and Hummer vehicles carrying heavy equipment. They said the U.S. troops crossed into the semi-autonomous Kurdistan region of Iraq. This comes despite U.S. President Donald Trump's claim that U.S. forces would not be deployed to any risk zones in the Middle East. But the U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said troops withdrawing from Syria will not be sent home. Speaking to reporters, Esper said the U.S. is not going to leave the Middle East in the state of turbulence. Defense Secretary Mark Esper says the U.S. will continue military operations against the Taliban until a peace settlement on Afghanistan is reached. Speaking to the media in Kabul, Esper said that the U.S. is not planning any Syria-type pullout from Afghanistan. He said Washington is committed to restoring peace in Afghanistan.
The United States remains fully committed to helping Afghans create a peaceful, stable, and prosperous Afghanistan, and to supporting the Afghans' efforts, led by the government, towards peace. A negotiated political settlement among Afghans is the best path to achieving this outcome.
U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi and a congressional delegation has made an unannounced visit to Afghanistan. The delegation met the top Afghan leadership, including President Ashraf Ghani, and discussed security, economic development, and governance. In a statement, Pelosi said her delegation was briefed by the U.S. diplomats on reconciliation efforts with the Taliban. She said the delegation stressed Afghan women must be at the table for the reconciliation talks. In Lebanon, Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri has agreed to a package of reforms with the government partners to ease an economic crisis. But despite al-Hariri's reforms package, a nationwide general strike has been called today to demand an overhaul of the government. This report has the details.
Danny Mortada has been protesting on the streets of Beirut since 17th October. He is unemployed but strongly believes it's his calling to put forward the people's demands and fight injustice.
When I see the Sunnis, the Shiites, the Christians, and the Druze from all regions, they don't care where from, how, and why. All united with one hand. This is alone energy.
The ongoing unrest in Lebanon was triggered by a proposed tax on WhatsApp calls. The measure was quickly scrapped. But anger over what was perceived as another attempt to squeeze the citizens dry has not abated.
We are here since the protest started, and we're not leaving until our demands are met. As they say, we are the children of the streets in 2015, 2011, and 2009. We were going to the streets during all those years, and we are continuing. We are staying in the streets.
Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri has proposed a tax-free solution to the country's economic woes, but this will not be an easy task, considering the country's public debt stands at $86 billion, which is over 150% of the national GDP, according to Lebanon's finance ministry.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus. Welcome back. Canadians are voting today in a general election seen largely as a referendum on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's leadership. Surveys predict a tight race as Trudeau's popularity plunged after the recent blackface scandal. Top contenders in the polls are the ruling Liberals and the Progressive Conservatives led by Andrew Scheer. Healthcare was the top issue during this year's election campaign, with the climate crisis not far behind. Voters will cast their ballots in 338 precincts across the country. 170 seats are needed to form a majority government. Pre-poll surveys show neither Trudeau nor Scheer is anywhere near that threshold. Evo Morales is leading Bolivia's presidential election race, securing 45% of the votes, with most of the ballots counted. But he is likely to face a second-round runoff against rival Carlos Mesa after failing to secure an outright majority. This will be the first time Morales faces a runoff vote in his 3 consecutive successful presidential polls. His rival Mesa celebrated his triumph in getting to the second round with 38% of the votes. South Korean-born evangelical pastor Shi Hyun-jong came third with 9% of the votes. Shi's support for either candidate will be crucial for the second round on 15th of December. The death toll in Chile has risen to 8 as violent anti-government protests continue. The demonstrations erupted over price hikes and social inequality on Friday. The government has declared a 15-day emergency amid escalating tensions in 7 major cities. After an emergency meeting, President Sebastián Piñera deployed troops to the city for the first time. 5 people were burned to death in a clothing factory fire near the capital Santiago after the premises were ransacked by the protesters. Defying the emergency curfew, hundreds of protesters have stormed metro stations in Santiago. Police and the recently deployed military are using tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. Crop stubble burning around the Indian capital has turned New Delhi's air toxic. Every winter, a noxious blend of car fumes and industrial emissions chokes the capital, making it one of the world's most polluted cities. Latest government data shows the air of Indian capital has once again plunged to poor on the Global Air Quality Index. With 258 points on the chart, the city is a couple of steps away from finding itself in a severe air crisis. The government says 3,000 incidents of stubble burning in adjacent areas since the late September has exacerbated the situation. The front page of every newspaper in Australia is blacked out today in protest against national security laws, which journalists say have stifled reporting and created a culture of secrecy. The campaign by the Right to Know coalition was sparked by federal police raids on the national broadcaster, the ABC. A News Corps journalist's home was also ransacked earlier this year. The media organization said the raids had been conducted over articles which had relied on leaks from whistleblowers. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said press freedom is important to Australia's democracy, but the rule of law needs to be upheld.
The government believes absolutely in press freedoms in this country, and we have taken steps. We have taken the steps to add additional defences into our laws to ensure that journalists, Mr Speaker, can get about their task. In fact, Mr Speaker, in protections that exceed that apply to many others around the country.
Unlike most liberal democracies, Australia does not have a Bill of Rights or constitutionally enshrined protections for freedom of speech. Now moving on, a 3-hour rescue mission has saved Jimmy the border collie in Australia. The pooch was stranded at the base of a cliff at Bells Beach in the state of Victoria. State emergency personnel and the Country Fire Authority attempted the dangerous 15-meter climb down the cliff. They strapped Jimmy into a harness and made the slow climb back. Jimmy had his owner's telephone number on his collar tag. Both the owner and the pooch were relieved to be reunited with smiles and a wagging tail. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with us. Lows and the highs of the business world. Now, most European stock markets are trading flat as investors wait to see whether the UK will leave the EU at the end of the month. The FTSE 100 in London and Paris's CAC 40 index are marginally higher. Frankfurt's DAX index is bucking the trend, gaining near 1%. The mood was similar in Asia, with Tokyo's Nikkei 225 and the Kospi in Seoul rising only fractionally. The Shanghai Composite and Hang Seng index recovered from early losses on hopes that the US and China would reach a trade deal by next month. The Hang Seng was also lifted by Beijing's decision allowed Chinese investors to invest in Hong Kong-listed dual-class shares. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.